I'm kind of a klutz, and I fell down and broke my leg. So this is not going to be the same kind of talk as what we've heard earlier. This is a story, and it's a story about things that happened in my career. And well, you'll just have to listen. I had to write it down because I wanted to make sure I got all the facts straight. You aren't imagining it. I was in my office, sitting at my desk, and Lee walked in, shut the door, plopped himself in the chair, and he said that to me. And I looked at him, and I burst into tears. I was like, what? And he said, no, you're not imagining any of it. It's really happening to you. These people here are awful. And I wanted to let you know because I've resigned. And I wanted to make sure you heard it from me before I left. This is a toxic environment and you need to get out. And I was just stunned. But I cried because I thought I was losing my mind. So I don't remember the rest of that conversation. I think I was just like, I would go home and tell my husband, I think I'm crazy. There's stuff going on here that I just don't understand. So let me tell you about some of the situations that happened to me during that period. But first of all, so I had 3 kids, and I was the primary wage earner for my family. And, my husband was a stay-at-home dad. He worked on the weekends as a hairdresser. It was pretty stressful. I was in my early 30s. So let me start with the previous 2 years before that. I had transferred to a new office in 1993. And in June of 1994, I was 5 months into my second pregnancy, and I had been doing field work out near Yosemite and some remote sites. And I got, Coronado Rock and all this stuff. I got all the samples back, sent everything to the lab, completely cleaned up my office. And on Sunday night, I went into preterm labor. Now, some people say, well, that's why you cleaned up your office. You're nesting or whatever. But I had no idea. I thought I was fine. So I ended up on bed rest for 3 months. And then I had a C-section, so I was on disability for 2 more months after that. So I had been gone for 9 months by the time I got back to work. And I had been in the transportation group, which I loved, and I got transferred to the environmental group because they had some work and they needed help, and so I got transferred. It wasn't a great fit for me. There were a bunch of really senior engineers in that group, and here I was a young mom with little kids, and it was hard. Anyway, so I was in the office for a little while, and then I got sent out in the field for about 3 months. We were working 6 days a week. So I would Zoom home every Saturday afternoon to be with my new baby, who was 8 months old at the time, just to turn around and leave again at 3 a.m. on Monday morning to get back in the field by 7 a.m. So I was on that project, and soon after I finished the project, I got pregnant again. Go figure. So Dylan was 11 months old, Carson was 4. And when I was 13 weeks pregnant, I had lost so much weight, my doctor put me on disability again and said, you have to work from home. You can work part-time. You work 4 hours a day, that's it. Well, she actually also said, those people you work for are assholes, and I don't want you to go into that office. Because when you're on preterm labor, you see your doctor every week. So we became pretty good friends, and I told her about my work environment and stuff. So Ethan was born on May 8th, and you do the math. I had 8 weeks of disability. My disability ran out on July 3rd. So I went back to work. One of my coworkers that week that I went back to work after being gone for several months, working part-time, I was actually working part-time for my old office, not for that office. One of the coworkers said to me, I see you're really working the system. And I went, what? What are you talking about? I had no idea. And he said, oh, you came back just in time to get the July 4th holiday paid. I was like, are you kidding me? My disability ran out. I need a paycheck. I support my family. And July 4th was the last thing from my mind, that who cared about July 4th? And I thought, you guys sit around thinking of this? You really? Don't you have anything more important to think about? So while I was out on maternity leave with Ethan, well, I was on disability and all that, I was supposed to have gotten a pay raise. But, out of sight, out of mind. But I didn't forget. It was important to me. It wasn't a big raise. It was barely anything, but it was the point that mattered. So I asked for my raise, and they were like, oh, yeah, right. And I said, I want it retroactive back to January when I was supposed to have gotten my raise. Well, I was working half-time, and then I was on disability, so it wasn't a lot of money. And you thought I would ask, I was like trying to rob a bank. I got all this pushback, and then when I finally got my retroactive pay, it was $94. I mean, it was stupid, but I got pushed around on it. So a little while later, after I had been back, I had my annual review, and my supervisor says to me, what were you thinking, having another baby? And I sat there like, trying to think of an appropriate response that wasn't, inappropriate. I just looked at him and I went, well, who had your kids? And he said, well, my wife. And I said, well, I'm my husband's wife. And yes, I had preterm labor, but that baby was fine. And I had preterm labor because I had been out in the field. And I was like, that was the weirdest performance review I ever had. So then I got an assignment on a pretty big government project, and I thought, oh, this is cool. It was another environmental job. And I ended up being the deputy PM, and I prepared the cost estimate, went with our purchasing manager over to the government agency to negotiate the task order. There was one line item that was a little weird, but both the government project manager and our project manager said, oh, it's a field task, we know what it is. It's just some repairs for the facility. Don't worry about it. We already have the costs. We know exactly what it is. So we negotiated it and actually came out of the negotiation in really good terms. And so we got the task order executed. Well, the next day I get a call from a furniture company. And they said they needed me to sign a purchase order. I said, no, I don't think so. And they said, yeah, you do. You have to sign this purchase order for this furniture. And I said, no, there's no furniture in my government contract. And then I guess they called the project manager for the government agency, and they called me and said, oh, yeah, well, those $7,500 for those miscellaneous repairs, that was really for furniture. And I said, no, sorry. So I come from a family of military service. My dad, all three of my brothers, my husband, his brother, his dad. I worked for the Corps of Engineers as a co-op student. I know that there's a GSA that provides furniture for military facilities. And I was like, no way, no way. So the project manager comes to me and says, what can we do to make you more comfortable with that? I just said, don't do it. I was just like, what are you talking about? And he said, no, really, what can we do to make you more comfortable with that? Because we need you to sign that purchase order. And so I'm like, what, am I being set up? You know, you sign it. You're the project manager, why the hell you need me to sign it? You know, and I was the least senior person in that department. And I think they wanted me to be the fall guy if that ever came up and somebody found out about it. And I felt really pushed into a corner because it was almost like I felt threatened. You know, my job, my career, my family. And I went home and I talked to Jack about it, my husband, and I was like, I'm not going to jail for these people. You know, I'm a professional engineer, and this was a company that was so respected for being an ethical company and having all these values, but I worked for a really messed up department. And it's not like it was the whole company, it was just this one group that I happened to get transferred into. I think they were psycho. My best friend worked in a different department, so I called her and I talked to her in the office and I said, Tony, you can't imagine what's going on here. And she said, we're not like that. That's not, that's not who we are. And I said, yeah, I know, but this is what's going on. Ultimately, what I did was I told the project manager that the agency manager could send me a letter signed saying they were changing. I only have 1 minute? Well, I'm going to go longer than that. Okay. Oh, yeah, 15 more minutes. I got to finish my story. So I ended up having to write the letter and email it to the agency manager, and then she signed it and faxed it back, and then I signed the purchase order, but I was pissed. So another day, I was in my office, and my group manager walked in and said, I know you're really busy, but do you have time to add another project? If you don't, we won't go after it. Don't worry about it. And I said, well, I was already working 12-hour days, and I don't see any let up for a couple of months. Next thing I know, they're writing the proposal and putting my name on it. So I went back to his office, and I said, what is going on? And he said, well, you don't listen very well. I said, what? He said, let's go through this again. You know, how busy are you? What do you think about this project? And I'm like, I'm not playing this frickin' game. I answered the same way I answered. Well, we had to go through this 3 more times. And he finally said, you're not listening to my nonverbal cues. And I went, I'm sorry, I didn't get that secret decoder ring. And he said, well, you need to listen better. I was like, dude, just tell me what you want. I probably didn't say dude back then. But another time I asked him, we had some internal training coming up, and I asked him why I wasn't invited. And he said, well, maybe subconsciously I wanted to see how you react to not being invited. I was like, man, you guys are psycho. So I tried to get transferred back into transportation. So this is around when Lee came in my office and said I wasn't imagining it. And I was like, oh my God, okay, well, that's good to know. So I tried to get transferred back to transportation where I had normal folks to work with, and I was told it wasn't in our business plan. And so I started looking for another job. And this is what's called being gaslighted. I mean, we've heard about gaslighting and stuff, and I didn't even think about that until just recently. I realized that's what they were doing. They were torturing me at work. So I found another job and I resigned, and the transportation people in my previous office flipped out and said, "You can't resign." And I said, "Watch me." And so I resigned and I went to another company, and I had a contract to work for them before I was actually at my new job because they valued what I did for them so much. Now, this was 25 years ago. The company doesn't exist anymore. None of those people are there anymore, and they aren't geotechs, so you wouldn't know any of them. Lee was a retired Air Force officer, and his disappointment at what was going on really rang true to me. He's the only one in that whole company, in that department, that told me I wasn't imagining it. But it really makes me sad for the me of 25 years ago that I went through that. I shouldn't have been treated that way. Nobody came and rescued me. I had to save myself. I didn't give up. I got pissed off. I dug in my heels, and it was hard. It was really hard. But I guess that's why I'm a badass now.